Okay, let's get started. Hello and welcome everyone, wherever you may be joining us today. My name is Yunus Zangebadi and I'm the Executive Director of the Institute for Peace and Diplomacy, or IPD. We are a foreign policy think tank operating both in Canada and the United States, committed to promoting sustainable peace through diplomacy, dialogue, and constructive engagement, all grounded in a realist and interest-based approach. We are pleased to host today's timely and important webinar titled Canada-Kazakhstan Relations, Seizing New Opportunities in a Changing World. The discussion today was inspired by the conversation I was fortunate to have with both Ambassador Kusanov and Ambassador Duggan. It became clear to me in those exchanges that there is a great deal of potential that needs to be tapped into concerning Canada-Kazakhstan relations. And here at IPD, we figured we should do what we can do best, which is using our platform to engage and inform a broader audience around this important topic. So today's event is just the starting point. We hope to work with all those invested in this bilateral relations to convene more conversations like this and build meaningful bridges among various stakeholders from both countries moving forward. With the changing international order, both Ottawa and Astana, neighbors to great powers, are actively recalibrating their global engagement strategies. Canada is seriously pursuing trade diversification and economic resilience under the new leadership of Prime Minister Mark Carney, while Kazakhstan is deepening its outward engagement to strategically balance its relations between East and West, as Central Asia becomes an increasingly attractive market for global investment. Within this context, the Canada-Kazakhstan relationship offers more opportunities, not only in trade and energy, but also in education, agriculture, technology, and multilateral cooperation, including shared commitment to nuclear non-proliferation and strengthening international institutions. To discuss all this more in depth, we're honored to be joined today by the two top diplomats engaged in shaping this relationship. Joining us from Ottawa, we're honored to have with us His Excellency Diletbek Kusanov, Ambassador of the Republic of Kazakhstan to Canada, who will speak on Kazakhstan's foreign policy vision and its priorities in building stronger ties with Canada. And joining us from Astana, we are pleased to be joined by His Excellency Christopher Duggan, Ambassador of Canada to the Republic of Kazakhstan, who will speak to Canada's new foreign policy priorities under the leadership of Prime Minister Carney and the importance of our bilateral relations with Kazakhstan within the broader context of Canadian strategic interests in Central Asia. Before I pass the floor over to the ambassadors, let me very quickly share some housekeeping notes. So for this session, we'll begin with opening remarks from the ambassadors, which will be followed by a short conversation moderated by myself. If you have any questions you'd like to raise during this segment, please use the Q&A function here on Zoom. I'll try to get to your questions during my exchange with the ambassadors. Following this segment, we'll move into a panel discussion with a group of distinguished speakers from both countries who will explore the Canada-Kazakhstan relationship in greater depth. This session will be moderated by my colleague Johnson Romero, who leads our Indo-Pacific program at IPD. And of course, this webinar is being recorded and we'll publish it and promote it later on IPD social media for broader engagement. Now, without further ado, it's my pleasure to pass the floor over to Ambassador Kusanov for his opening remarks. Ambassador, go ahead, the floor is yours.
Yunus, thank you very much for this very deep introduction of this event. And this is the really very important event for us. And first of all, I would like to thank you and the Institute of Peace and Diplomacy just for this opportunity to discuss, the opportunity to share the views. This also testifies the mutual interest. This event is also testifying the mutual interest of two countries to cooperate together just to realize untapped potential between two countries. And of course, and I would like also to welcome all participants of the webinar, and also would like happy to see the Ambassador Duggan, Your Excellency. Hello again. And I also seeing some people from different parts of Canada and Kazakhstan. I also would like to say hello. And if you allow me, I just very briefly, just as you mentioned, just will tell about Kazakhstani and Canadian relations, about Kazakhstan. You know that Kazakhstan at the moment is undergoing very important period of modernization. At the moment, we realizing a number of political and economic reforms. Our President Tokayev really just he is doing very hard work on just improving and our economic sector, just modernizing our political system. These reforms really includes the strengthening democratic institutions, improving governance, creating environment for innovation, business, and what is very important, create the opportunities for our civil society of Kazakhstan to actively take part in the all parts of our life, in all areas of our life in Kazakhstan, in political, economic, and as you see, and I know that Chris also just in Kazakhstan, he just sees him personally that our civil society is very actively participating in all areas of political and economic life in Kazakhstan. And I also would like to say that our main focus of these reforms is also goes to development of economic potential of Kazakhstan. Being like Canada, very rich on resources and oil and gas and etc., Kazakhstan is also focused on diversification of our economical structure. We developing very actively our agriculture sector, mining, industry, processing, etc., and we also working very actively on development our transit and logistical potential. For example, you probably heard about the project Middle Corridor, which is connecting the moment Asian and Europe through the Caspian Sea. This is also this project is in the top priority of our state tasks, I can say so. And what about relations between Kazakhstan and Canada? I would like to say that Kazakhstan consider Canada as one of the most important partner in North and South Americas. We consider Canada as one of the most important global player. This is the country, this is the member of G7, the member of G20, the member of other very important international organizations. And as we just have seen recently, under the leadership of Canada, we had just very successful summit, G7 summit in Kananaskis, and just we have seen a lot of positive outcomes for global development, development of global infrastructure, etc., and the Canada just playing very important role in promoting this global agenda. And of course, just we also considering this opportunity as on the basis of mutual, of course, cooperation just for Kazakhstan and for Canada. And at the moment, our top sectors I can mention where this our cooperation is developing very fast. This is mining, this is energy, agriculture sector. Just briefly to say, for example, we have a very successful story of cooperation with Cameco Corporation. This company already working many years in the Kazakhstani market. Just they have established the joint venture Inkai. They just producing and exporting uranium just for the global market. We also just since during the last 3 years, a number of Canadian companies also entered the Kazakhstani market. This like Ivanhoe, Take Resources, First Quantum, B2Gold, Hutch, and other companies. And what is also testifying about the openness of our market, there's good opportunities for investors in Kazakhstan. As just about talking about the figures today, our trade turnover is amounting more than $500 million, and I hope that this amount will be increased. And I know that Kazakhstan and Canada has much more potential. This is frankly to say it's not big amount. I mean the $500 million, and I hope that we will change this figure positively. And I also would like to tell that Kazakhstan also welcoming activity of the junior companies in our market. For example, Aras Minerals. This is the Canadian exploration company. I know that Darren Klink is also today with us in the webinar. And at the moment, they're developing one of the largest copper gold portfolios in Kazakhstan, which is also demonstrates the confidence for the other Canadian companies just to work with us. And at the same time, we also focusing on the the Kazakhstani business as well. We also would like just to see the Kazakhstani investors working in Canada. For example, one of the good example, this is the BI Group company. This is our big construction company of Kazakhstan. At the moment, they have plans to enter the Canadian market and to realize some social and infrastructural projects. We also paying a lot of attention for business exchanges. Just months ago, we had a very good business mission from Sudbury city. This I know that Yelena Zabutska is also here, just a representative of this administration of the city. She also was a part of this delegation, and we just welcome the outcomes of this visit. We know that the delegation had a lot of meetings during the visit, just with some state bodies and business sector of Kazakhstan. Also visited some mining companies in Kazakhstan. And I think this is the only beginning of such kind of interaction between the businesses. For example, last year we also had a very good mission from Alberta. It was the energy mission, which is also very successfully. Of course, we're also paying a lot of attention to our participation of Kazakhstan in the PDAC conference. We just consider the conference as a good bridge just for between two countries and for starting new projects in the area of mining and metallurgy and machine building as well. And hope that this cooperation will be continued. And I probably will stop on this because just I will starting to speak a lot. And in case of need, I can just answer the questions during the discussion. Yeah. So, but in generally, we are very, very much interested in cooperation with our friends, friend country, Canada. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your comprehensive presentation covering a wide range of topics from national reforms at home to your country's commitment to realizing the full potential of the Middle Corridor, and of course, the existing opportunities for Canada, especially on the business and economic front, to further engage with Kazakhstan. And now I would like to bring in Ambassador Duggan to share his opening remarks and also react to the remarks delivered by his counterpart.
Well, thank you very much. And to start with, I want to thank you, of course, for the invitation, the Institute for Peace and Diplomacy. Also, it's great to see Ambassador again. And he gave a masterful overview to start with in terms of the engagement on the commercial side. So I will start by saying that, it's my pleasure, obviously, to be here from this evening in Astana. As you may know, I am not only the ambassador to Kazakhstan, but the entire Central Asian region, so encompassing all 5 countries. But I'm delighted to talk about the bilateral relationship between Canada and Kazakhstan tonight. And I want to reiterate my thanks to the ambassador in Ottawa. I must say that you were exceptionally gracious when I was first named as ambassador to Kazakhstan. And I'm happy that we remain in touch as we both aim to build, obviously, closer relations between our countries for the benefit of both of our nations. So it's great to see you again. So my team here at the embassy in Astana, of course, to begin with, we consider ourselves quite privileged to represent Canada and Kazakhstan. It's a country that is remarkably similar, actually, to Canada. Wide open spaces, breathtaking beauty, abundant natural resources, which the ambassador already spoke about. Friendly people, and of course, wonderfully frigid winters. But at the same time, Canada has, as you know, Canada had an election this spring. We have a new prime minister. We have many new ministers leading our government. As you've noticed, we're working with urgency and purpose to deliver a new mandate that will see Canada take on a renewed role in the world, including, as you mentioned, diversifying our trade and commercial relationships. Canada sees with the challenge not only to improve our economic and security relationship with our closest neighbor, the United States, obviously, but also to build a strong coalition of partner countries. So countries like Kazakhstan that share many of our values and believe in international cooperation and the free exchange of goods, services, and ideas. Canada's G7 presidency, as you mentioned, also presents an important opportunity for Canada to make progress towards shared goals, like protecting our communities, building energy security, accelerating the digital transition, securing existing partnerships, and building new ones. So I would say, while I believe the relationship has much, as the ambassador mentioned, unfulfilled potential, and I'll be quite frank about that. I see lots of opportunities, and I feel quite privileged to be in this position, so we can build on those opportunities and to engage so we can meet that potential. So I'll start with a trade perspective. Canada views Kazakhstan as a strategic partner to diversify global trade connections and access emerging markets in Central Asia. And Kazakhstan's abundant natural resources, growing infrastructure, and evolving business environments also present opportunities for Canadian exporters and investors, especially in sectors, as we've mentioned, mining, energy, agriculture, technology, and education. Kazakhstan is obviously Canada's most important trade partner in Central Asia. With bilateral merchandise trade, as the ambassador mentioned, about 500 million in 2024. Now, from the stats that I have, that represents, unfortunately, a bit of a drop, about 35% drop from 2023. But the decline, as I understand it, is mainly due to fluctuations in uranium and iron markets in particular, which dominate Canadian imports from Kazakhstan. Uranium, as mentioned, also accounted for about almost $300 million, while iron imports were around 13 million. Canadian exports to Kazakhstan increased slightly to about $146 million in 2024, led by industrial machinery, aircraft, agricultural equipment. But part of the good news story, which I think illustrates great potential, is the Canadian foreign direct investment in Kazakhstan rose from about $1 billion in 2021 to 2.2 billion in a year, and it's been growing ever since. So while the trade is concentrated in extractive industrial sectors, there are many other opportunities, as we can discuss. So we see a growing interest from Canadian companies in many sectors, as mentioned, agriculture, mining. We have a new partnership in emissions reduction, for example, energy, ICT, and education, where we've signed several MOUs recently between Canadian and Kazakh educational institutions. Many Kazakh delegations have also gone to Canada to participate in trade shows. PDAC, as the ambassador mentioned, is a good example of that. Our trade team in Astana has worked with over 100 companies that are active or interested in expanding to Kazakhstan. So other highlights, and I'll be very brief, include we have a capacity building program, which committed over $8 million to support security and counterterrorism across the entire region. And we also have the Canada Fund for Local Initiatives, which supported impactful projects across Central Asia, aimed at empowering marginalized communities, including human rights training for police officers, community-based ecotourism projects for women, efforts to combat gender-based violence, improved media capacity, political inclusion for women with disabilities. Collectively working with Kazakh partners, these efforts have strengthened, I would argue, community resilience and advanced long-term social cohesion across, not only in Kazakhstan, but across the region. And so this gives you a flavor of some of the wide-ranging engagements that we have that are very productive and successful. So allow me to say a few words, if you don't mind, about where I see things going in the bilateral relationship as well. As ambassador, covering a region that is just slightly smaller than the entire EU, I take a really pragmatic approach to identifying areas for greater engagement. As an important Central Asian nation bridging Asia, Middle East, and Europe, Kazakhstan is in a key position that in a strategically vital region. Indeed, Kazakhstan is in a pivotal position in ensuring broader global supply chain security that connects the world and its markets. Canada is a trading nation, as many of you know, that owes its economic well-being to accessing markets, and is very interested in how these global supply chains develop and offer a variety and a diversity of trade routes to support our trading and commercial relations. Canada and Kazakhstan have also been enjoying strong cooperation in the area of governance and legislative reform. A recent milestone in this partnership was Canada's support for Kazakhstan's development of anti-stalking legislation, which was signed into law on July 16th, so just a few days ago. And that builds on a technical assistance program between our justice experts in Canada and partners in Kazakhstan that began with a legislative approach to combating domestic violence, which is an issue that faces all of our countries, unfortunately. We believe this cooperation will continue to strengthen, that is my strong intent, and deepen in the years ahead, which again reflects our shared commitment to advancing legal protections and obviously good governance. Strengthening bilateral political ties with both countries it shows and demonstrates our commitment to multilateral diplomacy and UN frameworks as well. Kazakhstan's consistent contribution to UN missions and its balanced diplomacy offers Canada potential opportunities to partner in broader peace operations, border security, and various global governance initiatives. So as the ambassador mentioned, as Kazakhstan progresses under its new Kazakhstan modernization vision, which is really impressive, making great gains, including judicial and civic and anti-corruption reform, Canada will explore opportunities for governance training, institutional capacity building, advisory support. But this is a two-way street. This is an ability for us to share best practices in both ways and to grow together within our bilateral relationship. So I'll just circle back briefly on our commercial relationship. So like Canada, Kazakhstan is also actively seeking to diversify both its economy and foreign investor base. And in turn, Canadian firms have significant potential to expand their footprint across emerging high-value sectors, increased collaboration and trade facilitation, particularly through the Trans-Caspian corridor, as mentioned, along with governance and institutional capacity building, will further strengthen these bilateral ties. And also trade missions, reinforced by political engagement, private and public sector dialogues, institutional partnerships will be key to realizing this potential as well. Not to mention, of course, events like this one right now that we're engaged in. It's another step along the way of building that relationship and identifying common interests where we can work together. So in addition to regional integration, we're exploring various bilateral trade and investment agreements as well that promote mutual economic growth. Both countries emphasize the importance of establishing open, fair, and transparent trade frameworks that reduce barriers, protect intellectual property rights, and encourage sustainable business practices. This shared commitment to liberalized trade and economic integration aligns with broader international rules-based systems, fostering a predictable environment for investors and exporters from both nations. It also helps diversify supply chains, as mentioned, supports innovation, and creates opportunities for Canadian companies in sectors such as natural resources and technology, agriculture, and infrastructure development, as we've summarized previously. But there are other areas as well that I hasten to add. Canada is often recognized as somewhat of a middle power with a long track record of multilateral diplomacy. Kazakhstan has charted its own foreign policy path as a strategic regional actor, navigating very complex geography with competing influences. Both countries pursue multi-vector foreign policies through different origins. Canada stems from a commitment to rules-based multilateralism, and Kazakhstan reflects a pragmatic need to balance relations, also with major regional powers. An increasing multipolar world we're engaged in. Both countries where we see strong overlap, of course, as we value stable rules-based international order and seek to avoid zero-sum alignments, positioning ourselves as bridge builders in international forums, in UN, the OSCE, for example. Kazakhstan's active engagement with multilateral platforms, as mentioned, the UN, and Canada's leadership currently, we have the presidency of the G7 and NATO and OECD, highlight differing alignments, of course, but both countries emphasize regional stability, nuclear non-proliferation, as we mentioned, and conflict prevention. So there's great potential to build greater alignment in peace and security efforts, such as, for example, support for UN peacekeeping, border security, as I mentioned previously, counter-radicalization, especially where interests intersect in Central Asia and Global South, broadly speaking. So I'll sum up in a moment, but we share interests, and I think this is a very important aspect that the whole world is facing, and that's interest in climate change, and climate diplomacy, and sustainable development goals. And we mentioned governance reform, but we need to create space and support each other in these various forums so that we can move forward together in a positive way. So we emphasize, obviously, climate change and climate diplomacy, and this also has a direct linkage to our commercial interests, which speaks to clean energy, the green transition. So this is also an avenue for advancing our shared priorities in international forums. So while this provides a very brief walk along the waterfront of relations, this is an overview where, from my perspective, I see the bilateral relationship. We are obviously profoundly and keenly aware that the world is engaged in a shift where new partnerships and reinforcing existing ones are going to be key to our prosperity and our well-being. So I will stop there. But certainly, I'm privileged and honored to have this position. I think it's exceptionally dynamic and exciting place to be. And of course, I look forward to continuing working with the ambassador, my counterpart in Ottawa, and all the excellent Kazakh interlocutors that I've gotten to know in the few months that I've been here. But of course, we're going to do this in a way that's mutually beneficial for all of us. So I'll stop there. Again, thank you very much for this opportunity. I hope that was useful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your insightful presentation. Of course, it was quite useful and extensive. Like Ambassador Kusanov, you also covered many areas and issues. What I'm trying to now, what the common theme that I now draw from both remarks is that it is it's crystal clear to both sides that there are immense opportunities and untapped potentials that are not being realized at the moment, or at least not at the pace that we want them to. So what's the real challenge from your perspective, sitting in Astana as well as in Ottawa, the challenges that prevent such potentials from being realized, both in Ottawa and Astana? And then, when I look at it from Canadian perspective, here in Canada, we understand that the government's top priority now is trade talks with the US, and now we see the diversification efforts mainly being targeted at the Europeans and countries in the Indo-Pacific. But with Kazakhstan, as you mentioned, a strong economy in Central Asia, how can you as an ambassador highlight that further to decision makers in Ottawa, the Prime Minister, the ministers, and the role that we can play? And I also want to hear the perspectives from your counterpart about what he does in Ottawa, as well as in his communication to Astana, that this bilateral relations can further improve and meet its full potential. So we can start with you, Ambassador Duggan, and then we'll go to Ambassador Kusanov.
I was hoping the other ambassador would go first. He's always so much more insightful than me, but I'll kick it off. Listen, I think part of the challenge from my perspective is distance. We're very far apart, even though we have so much in common, and we share common views on a number of geopolitical challenges and the challenges facing the world. We have a lot in common. I think we're on the right track, and I think we're moving in the right direction. But I can be impatient. Like many people, I see so many opportunities, and I'd like us to seize them as quickly and as possible. But we need to take a pragmatic, measured approach. And what I can say is that every time that I have Canadian companies come through, and I meet with all of them, of course, and often I will join them in meetings with Kazakh interlocutors. They always are impressed. They're always wondering, why did we take so long to come? And I know that this is not lost on many other countries that do visit commercial relations and political relations with Kazakhstan. There are a lot of entities that are very interested, for good reason, in the opportunities that present themselves in Kazakhstan, in particular, in Central Asia in general. So all the Canadian companies that come through, as I mentioned, are always impressed with the opportunities that are here. But it takes time. So last year we had over 100 companies come through, and many of them are pursuing engagement moving forward. Then that's one aspect of it. I think it requires greater engagement, greater communication. Again, forums like this. Every little bit helps. And from my perspective, I'm very keen to engage in public forums or sit on panels or to talk to people to encourage greater connections. Because it's obvious to me, but that this is my job. I need to know these things. But when I speak to people in Canada and companies and others, I think people are not aware intuitively of what's available. So that's obviously a centerpiece to my job. is to ensure that I'm building those bridges and communicating and articulating clearly about the opportunities that exist, not only commercially, as we've discussed, but also looking at ways we can support each other in multilateral bodies, and also to help facilitate that dialogue, which is very helpful, which can open doors to further engagement. So perhaps I'll stop there, and I will send it back to my counterpart. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador.
I absolutely agree with Chris about the long distance between our two countries. This is really difficulty just in development of our relations. But I also just would like to mention some moments as well. In my personal opinion, just working here in Canada, what I'm seeing here on the ground, and I'm seeing that we still facing the lack of information about Kazakhstan and the region as a whole. For example, just we still have a lot of, sometimes stereotypes about my country, about the region. I will not mention that. So what the question sometimes I'm hearing, but actually I understand clearly that we have to work just to raise awareness of Canadian people and Canadian business about the opportunities, and about even just about the level of life, or just style of life of this region. Because just if we will just compare with our neighbors, for example, we have the most important trading partner, for example. This is European Union. It's not so far from us. You know this. We have a lot of contacts. For example, at the moment we have more than $50 billion trade turnover, and with Canada it's only half a billion. Here is more than 50 billion. With China, for example, we have 44. With Russia, it's almost 30. This is what it showed us that this is the still we have this lack of information. Sometimes even some fears of business just to enter this region. It's like undiscovered region yet, and that's why I'm seeing this. What is very important is for Canada just to start, maybe just to have some researches of this region. For example, just to make something similar what Canada is, I think, brilliant doing on the Indo-Pacific region. Actually, Canada has adopted the spatial strategy on Indo-Pacific. Every day, the global affairs, Canada just working on the increasing relations with each country of this region. As we're seeing the geography of the high-level visits, it's also just only covering mostly this region as well. That's why I'm just I'm thinking that we have just to change this situation, and maybe to start thinking about even some concept on Central Asia or something else. I know that's probably strategy. It will be just a bit early for Canada, but maybe just some concept or some contours on Central Asia regions. It should be already discussed, because Canada at the moment is also in very important stage of development, and we're seeing how the Prime Minister Carney is trying to diversify economy just to increase the global role of Canada. And I think it's Central Asia is one of the most important regions in this sense, in this terms, and Kazakhstan, this is the bridge between Asia and Europe, and to be presented here in Kazakhstan, this is a big advantage for Canadian companies. Yes, so and this is what I'm seeing here. This is like a main obstacle, just actually for which is sometimes making small barriers. But I can say also that last time we also seeing already changing the picture. At the moment, a lot of people already visited the region, they visited Kazakhstan. They just talk to each other, some exchanging information, and sometimes already seeing that the picture already is changing. Maybe not so fast as we want, but it's changing, and we have to work on this direction. And for example, your institution of peace and diplomacy, this is you're just just making this very important role just in connecting our two countries.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. No, I also believe that it's important to offer such a platform and engage various stakeholders interested in exploring not only Kazakhstan relations but Canadian foreign policy overall. I mean, in the participants list, I see Dylan Robertson from the Canadian Press present and listening to this webinar, and he's one of the journalists in Ottawa that covers foreign policy, and also there are others listening to this discussion. And I think it's important that we highlight such potentials between our both countries, but the opportunities to visit respective countries also matter. I mean, it was my first time visiting Astana earlier this year, where I also had the chance to meet our ambassador in Astana. I had have similar conversations we're having today. So that really changes the mind once you go and visit the country, engage with different people in the country, as opposed to what we see on the news and learn here and there. And on that note, we are very much honored to be hosting a follow-up panel discussion with speakers from both countries right after this panel. But before I hand it over to my colleague Johnson to moderate the next session, I would like to first thank both ambassadors for giving us the opportunity to both participate and share your remarks with our audience. It was an absolute honor to have this opportunity. And if you have any final remarks, the floor is yours. And then after that, we'll hand over the floor to Johnson.
Well, I will jump in and just very briefly say, listen, thank you very much for this opportunity. I look forward to listening in a little bit in the next panel and to hear some other good ideas of how we can continue to build these relations. So again, thank you. I look forward to being in touch. And when I'm back in Ottawa in August, I look forward to having lunch with you, Ambassador, around the third week of August. So I look forward to that as well. So all the best and thank you again.
Thank you, Ambassador.
Yunus, I wanted just once again to thank you. My special thanks for your institute, that for you paying attention to very important topic, to very important region, Central Asia and Kazakhstan. I always will be open for you. I will be always just open for anybody just who would like to talk about Kazakhstan, who would like just to discuss some avenues of cooperation. And of course, I will be happy to see Chris here just in Ottawa, just having opportunity, having lunch or just having a conversation on some future perspectives, how we can just deepen our relations between Kazakhstan and Canada, because I am absolutely sure we have huge potential between Kazakhstan and Canada. And and I would like just to wish all participants very good discussions and also some elaborations, good proposals. We will be very appreciate just to get them and just to work on them. And thank you very much once again.
Thank you, Ambassador. We look forward to working with you more closely moving forward. Okay.
Thank you.
Johnson, over to you.
All right. Well, thanks to Yunus, my colleague over at IPD, for handing it over. And I'm pleased to kickstart the second part of today's session on Canada-Kazakhstan relations. Thank you once more to the ambassadors for joining us. And I'm pleased to be joined by three very knowledgeable stakeholders in the relationship. I'll briefly introduce them, and we'll have the next 30 to 45 minutes to discuss sort of the outlook and direction for the relationship moving forward. So to start with, we have, well, I'll start from what I see on my camera screen right now, but we have Yelena Zabutskaya. She is working for the government, for the municipal government of Greater Sudbury. And there she, as the ambassador had mentioned, had just conducted a recent visit to Kazakhstan, looking at the opportunities in the economic relationship. Second, here we have the Honorary Consul General of Kazakhstan to Canada, Darren Klink, who's also president of RS Minerals. And then third, we have Miras Jiyanbayev. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly, but if not, do correct me. And he joins us to give a more geopolitical perspective from where he sits as an advisor to the chairman of the board for international affairs at Maksud Narkabayev University. So with that said, I'm also pleased to introduce myself as director of the Pacific program at MPD. So I'd like to turn to perhaps Darren first. Since we're talking about a lot of the economic components of the relationship, both from the domestic Canadian perspective as it looks towards diversification, as well as from Kazakhstan perspective as a country that's looking for greater investment and more partnerships abroad. I'd like to sort of turn to you and ask why is Kazakhstan an attractive market for Canadian investment in this context? And which sectors in particular would be of greater interest or would be easier to tap into for Canadian firms looking into this space?
Good morning. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks very much for including us today. Well, I can speak obviously directly to the critical mineral space. That's Aris Minerals' key focus, and as Ambassador Kusanov mentioned, we're focused in the copper gold space and are relatively early entrants, having got involved about 4 years ago. And subsequently, we've seen a lot of additional companies that have kind of followed in and have started to show interest. I think, key sectors where you see the overlap and similarities amongst the economies, critical minerals, energy security, agriculture have all been mentioned. And truly, when you look at Canada and you look at the Kazakh economies, those are important sectors. And so I think, for a country such as Canada, with world leaders really in terms of developing in energy security, clean energy, and of course also in critical minerals, at a time when the world, I think, is reevaluating and looking for where those important things that we all need day in and day out are going to come from. There's enormous synergies between these two countries to work together. So I think from a business perspective, definitely, our experience has been one that's been very positive. No doubt when you go into a new jurisdiction, there's lots of things to learn. Time zones were something that were mentioned as well. You're effectively 12 time zones away. And so you can't get much further, from a tyranny of distance and having to manage time zones and doing calls early or late at night, for example, as you establish things. But ultimately, it takes commitment. And I think from a Canadian business perspective, looking for those opportunities, getting over there and having, getting boots on the ground. But definitely, your critical minerals, energy security, agriculture, and of course, President Tokayev has also put forth key initiatives around industrialization, and I'm sure there's lots of opportunities as well for Canadian companies, and then also things like education. The number of times that I've spoke with Kazakhs that are in Canada that are studying, and then going back to Kazakhstan, there's enormous opportunities from that perspective, and I think both Canada and Kazakhstan have good reputations from that perspective in terms of working together on educational level initiatives as well.
All right, thanks, Darren. I'd also like to remind the audience that they can submit questions to the Q&A box we have going on in the background, and we'll get to that towards the end. So feel free to share any of the questions that we might have, and we'll get to them. On this question of the opportunities in the economic relationship, I'd also like to turn to Yelena. Given your recent exchange in Astana and the opportunities that you saw there, both from the private sector perspective and also from the perspective as someone who works in business development at facilitating investment, what opportunities do you see for whether that's Ontario-based companies or otherwise in the mineral sector for participating in Kazakhstan's broader economy and mining industry?
Thank you, Johnson, and thank you everyone for being here today. I'd like to thank both embassies because they played a crucial role of Canadian delegation visit to Astana in early June. It was my first time as well. And as both ambassadors mentioned, distance might be an issue there in building the relationship, but let's focus on the palpable potential that representatives of Sudbury and Canada overall felt that week. It was a wonderful experience, and Sudbury alone has over 300 mining supply and service companies that serve mining industry from the exploration phase all the way to the mine closure. And that's what Sudbury and Northern Ontario and overall Canada has to offer. We were fortunate to visit Kazakhmys, Nur-Kazgan mine. It was a 3-hour drive from Astana, but it showed us that Canadian technology and innovation have place on the Kazakhstan market. Yes, there might be some technologies that maybe market is not ready quite yet, and the technology adoption will take time. But Canada has the solutions to put Kazakhstan mining industry forward, and that's what we felt. And all the companies that participated in the mission expressed strong interest to come back. And with that, we would like to target Mines and Minerals Show in Almaty in 2026, perhaps work together with both sides of embassies and present as a Canadian pavilion and build more interest. We know that countries like China and Germany and Spain have very strong exhibits during those times, but unfortunately Canada is not represented. So that's one of the opportunities how we can bring our companies along and make sure that they take advantage of the market. Central Asia is large, and we're all aware of the potential in the mining industry right there. Interestingly enough, that Sudbury-based companies have been trading with Kazakhstan for many years now. I just happened to have a conversation with Komatsu, who views their Sudbury operations as the global mining operations for this company, even though they're headquartered in Japan, and they've been working with the Kazakhstan mining companies for years now. So that says that those lines of communication and transportation already exist. We need to learn from the existing experiences and push forward.
Thanks, Yelena. I'd like to turn to Miras, perhaps give us an assessment of the geopolitical perspective and motivation, both in Kazakhstan and elsewhere, at sort of looking towards new economic partnerships beyond traditional ones, and to see if we can have a bit more light shed on sort of the incentives and motivations in Kazakhstan for why it's engaging with Canadian partners and others on these questions of new economic investments and diversifying economic partnerships.
Well, thank you, Johnson. Thank you, everyone. First, of course, I would love to thank our colleagues from Institute for Peace and Diplomacy for organizing this panel, a timely, perfect initiative, because, well, if I may to put a joke here, if Indonesia is something described as the world's biggest invisible country, Kazakhstan is actually a proud member of this group for many foreign policy stuff in some of the regions. And we understand that the real awareness and the real information about our country, Central Asia in general, is underrepresented in the mainstream of your media in your part of the world. Anyway, both of our countries, from geopolitical perspective, so-called middle powers, or identify yourself as a middle powers, actually seek the same end state, a stable world order not dominated by any single hegemon. Middle powers thrive in a pluralistic, rule-based order where no giant can unilaterally call the shots. Canada has always championed exactly that vision, something we call rules-based international order, while Kazakhstan also favors a multipolar equilibrium where it doesn't have to choose between Moscow, Beijing, or Washington. Recognizing these parallels, we might ask what practical steps could Canada and Kazakhstan take together as middle powers in this fragmented world order. While they don't have deep bilateral alliance historically, the change in geopolitical landscape creates openings for strategic collaboration between these bounded agents, if I am made to call it like that. The underlying strategic logic is the same: diversify alliances, reduce hegemonic dependencies, and build a horizontal network of cooperation. in the age of fragmentation, the best insurance for both is to cultivate a web of relationships that can sustain an open international system. Such a middle power partnership would also carry important symbolic weight. It will demonstrate that bringing different middle powers in cooperative efforts is possible, a rebuttal to the notion that world must split into the blocks of the West and the rest. Canada and Kazakhstan coming together in common interests would underscore a key point. Middle power's agenda is not about ideology, but about stability and sovereignty. What countries ultimately want a world where no bully, whether friend or foe, can dominate others, and where rules protect the rights of all states, wherever big and small. Both Kazakhstan and Canada are resource-rich nations with vast territories, diversified economies, and actually shared commitment to multilateralism, sustainability, innovation, and good governance. On bilateral track, we have so many things to do because first, we have complementary interest in sector such as critical minerals, agriculture, education, clean energy, infrastructure development, offering significant opportunities for closer collaboration and translation as a good sample of middle power cooperation. The opportunities are quite clear for those prepared to explore them, not only to strengthen trade and investment, but to contribute together to regional stability, sustainable development, and global good governance. In recent years, if you saw the progress of Kazakh foreign policy, we have a new regions of strategic presence of our national interest. For example, for the first time, we have a comprehensive agenda within African continent. Now, many years ago, many of my colleagues will argue, what can we do in Africa, or what can we do in Southeast Asia, because it's too far from Darren already mentioned different time zones and a factor of territories and the space. Anyway, we have many things to do. We have many things to collaborate and many areas to collaborate. That's why I think this panel on Kazakhstan and Canada relations is actually a good starting point to conversation on what we can do as two middle powers, as responsible global players, and how we can make the system more fair and just for middle powers to represent our own voices in global governance system, especially in the UN 80 world. Thank you.
Thanks, Miras. I think what you're saying there about the broader international economic context is something that everyone is in more discussion about, especially in the last year, given Canada's very dependent trade relationship with the US. And as you were saying, a lot of countries are reassessing their existing dependencies, North American or otherwise. So I do want to sort of use that as a frame to ask perhaps Darren and Yona as well, just what are you hearing from the private sector as you engage them about sort of the policy push for companies to look more at these new partnerships, new opportunities? Maybe I'll start with Darren there. When you're over the course of your engagements as the honorary consul in BC, what you're hearing from private sector stakeholders when you're trying to push forward these economic partnerships into real and tangible terms.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Johnston. Yes, honorary consul for British Columbia here on the West Coast. So definitely get inquiries around Kazakhstan and doing business in Kazakhstan. Once you get over that hurdle, I think in terms of distance and the tyranny of distance, I think success sort of often breeds success. And so I know in the mining space, we're used to traveling far distances, looking where there's opportunities. I think as Ambassador Kusanov mentioned as well, I mean, I think there's still a lot of improvement that we can do in terms of awareness of Kazakhstan, but it's definitely changed materially over the last couple of years. From a perspective with regards to, I guess, Canadian government and trying to encourage that sort of, cross-border bilateral sort of trade. No doubt the world is a different place today than it was a year ago. I think all of us individually, whether or not, we live in Vancouver or Toronto, we work for Canadian companies that maybe only do business in Canada. I think we all recognize that having all of our eggs in one basket with regards to a trading partner in the United States is a much more challenging sort of strategy today than it perhaps was 2 or 3, 4 years ago. When we think about the Central Asian region, Central Asia, the Middle East, South Asia, there's a lot of growth opportunities there that are coming at us over the next 20 years. And so as Maras is mentioning, looking at, the comparisons, I guess, between Kazakhstan, which of course is the largest economy in Central Asia. I think it's larger than the other 4 countries put together. Enormous opportunity and synergies given the similarities in the type of economies that we have. And so, success breeds success. I think the more that we can open up channels, the better. I think the other thing that, is an obvious one is really the importance of that relationship and it being shown and identified by the highest levels of our political leaders. When was the last time that the Prime Minister of Canada, visited Kazakhstan? I think it was Prime Minister Jean Chrétien. That's a long time ago. And for many business leaders, perhaps the younger ones that are in their 20s or 30s, they wouldn't remember that anyway. So I think, we really need to put that action to work, walk the talk, I guess. And so having, a high level ministerial delegation, perhaps from Canada going to Kazakhstan, maybe even including Prime Minister Carney, would that ever send a strong message, with regards to relationships between Canada and Kazakhstan and really kind of play out, the synergies amongst throughout the economy and the industries and open up opportunities, I think from that perspective and perhaps even, further put that Canada-Kazakhstan relationship more at the forefront, particularly, given the large economies that are on either side of our borders, being the United States and as Maras mentioned, China and Russia.
Yeah, I mean, I think you speak to a lot of important things that are on everyone's minds, especially thinking about getting the conditions right and the political signaling right for these economic opportunities to actually manifest, more quickly than we would traditionally expect them to. Maybe, Yelena, you could speak to that from your own view and role, Canada-based, but also still very much engaged crossing the Pacific to do so. What you're hearing in terms of what businesses want and what they need from both the policy perspective, what government, federal, municipal, provincial, what have you, are showing that they're demonstrating to make these conditions possible for businesses. And what they're looking for in Kazakhstan, whether that's the overall environment for investment, transparency, or other things related to operations there. From your experience, what are you hearing on these questions?
Thank you, Johnson. And that's very, very good question, to be honest, because we work very closely with the local businesses here, and we know exactly what they're doing on the day-to-day basis in terms of exploring new markets. Some companies in Sudbury export to 40+ countries. So they're no strangers to the long distances and time zones, but obviously that's a consideration when you work internationally. Kazakhstan is far away, but it's not impossible, right? Of course, there is observations about the language challenges, and in my opinion, being in Kazakhstan for the first time, they're quite advanced with the English speaking between the main companies, right? So that presents some challenge, but there's also a lot of ways around it, right? We live in the era when AI and all the translation is there, so that is important. And after visiting Astana this June, I saw that the companies who put their homework in place and prepared materials in one of the main languages in Kazakhstan did extremely well. The technology adoption on the Kazakhstani side is not always as high as we'd like to see. So some mines currently implementing the LTE network or 5G networks, and many of our products and services need that infrastructure in place to succeed. So that's potentially where we can help and perhaps push the mining industry forward. The platforms like PDAC, we all spoke about it, and in the mining world, it's Kazakhstan, Canadian largest trade show where both countries can collaborate very, very well. So, Darren, I like your idea about maybe the higher powers paying the visit to Kazakhstan, or at least having a dialogue, open dialogue at one of the platforms at PDAC. I know that Kazakhstan put a lot of work into exhibiting in the 2025 Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada, and they have the same plans for 2026. It helps with awareness tremendously, because I see companies in attendance who attend the sessions and learn about the market and opportunities. Also on the municipal level, I can say that businesses go for opportunities first, but they need to be supported by the policies from the provincial and federal government. And that often comes into financial supports and financial incentives as well. There are programs like Can Export that actually incentivize companies to go and look for the new markets. And that would be wonderful from our perspective, because to exhibit at mines and mineral show in Almaty, it's easily up to 20,000 Canadian dollars to have a presence there. If you're talking about SMEs, who often are the drivers of the economy, that's a lot of money. So we need to to support and incentivize those visits. Luckily, in Sudbury, we were able to do it with the municipal funding for the past mission. Our mine supply and service companies could access funds to travel internationally and explore new markets, but we would like to see more support from the provincial and federal partners. And given that Canada has been relying on the close relationship with the US for the last many, many years, now is the time to turn around and see where else we can go and what other countries can benefit from Canadian expertise.
I think that's a very valuable insight into what a lot of stakeholders on the ground are seeing and hearing from each other in the relationship. And I sort of want to pull on that big picture context by turning to Miras once again, because he had spoken about the international system that's undergoing many changes, especially over the past year, and how many governments are changing direction on the types of signaling and partnerships that they wish to articulate or as a priority. Sort of looking at the economic dimension of this geopolitical picture, Miras, how can Canada and Kazakhstan work together to sort of uphold the economic system or the trade governance architecture that we have, whether that's through the WTO or otherwise, or through free trade negotiations? What are the sort of complementary areas where both Ottawa and Kazakhstan have overlap in order to sort of make sure that the broader international economy is able to facilitate a lot more of these partnerships in a way that's in the interest of both countries?
Thank you. I think both of our countries first have brilliant experience in advancing multilateral formats. For example, Kazakhstan was always proud of its multi-vector foreign policy, which is for us is balanced, constructive foreign policy based on our national interest. Our approach is firmly rooted in multi-vector strategy, actually allow us to build partnership with a diverse range of countries and international organizations while maintaining flexibility and promoting regional stability. The logic is quite straightforward. By cultivating diverse partnership, Kazakhstan maximizes strategic autonomy and hedges against over-reliance on any one pattern. As a result, the country today enjoys diplomatic ties with 186 nations. and has no conflict or unresolved issue with any states. I think this balancing act, which can be firmly described as making bridges, not walls, is maintaining friendly links from Moscow to Washington, Beijing to Brussels, Tokyo to Paris, has helped Kazakhstan preserve its sovereignty and stability in an often turbulent region. A key element of Kazakhstan's strategy is active engagement in multilateral institutions and regional diplomacy. Ambassador Kusainov mentioned huge success of Canadian foreign policy, being member of G7, G20, and the rest of the international formats. But one of the key milestones for Kazakh foreign policy, which was actually co-sponsored by 152 countries, including Canada, is actually a huge result, which is United Nations General Assembly adopted a resolution to establish UN Regional Center for SDG for Central Asia and Afghanistan in Almaty. Well, this center will be complemented by UN volunteers, sub-regional office, and position Kazakhstan as a regional hub for sustainable development in multilateral cooperation across Central Asia and Afghanistan. Just to remind you that Kazakhstan was the first, and actually is the first post-Soviet republic and first Central Asian nation to chair OSCE summit in 2010, culminating in hosting OSCE first summit of the 21st century and issuing the Astana Declaration, quite successful document for OSCE. We chaired. We also actually served as a non-permanent member of UN Security Council in 2017-18, the first Central Asian country to do so. This milestone boosted Kazakhstan's image as a responsible stakeholder in international security. Now we work with Canada on our peacekeeping capabilities. Kazakhstan is one of the founding members of CICA, or Conference on Interaction and Confidence Building Measures in Asia, an Asian Security Forum created back in 1992. Today, CICA has 28 member states, and it is a full-fledged international organization under Kazakh stewardship and current chairmanship with headquarters in Astana. To talk on Canada and Kazakhstan, our countries could not be more different on one hand, because yet the two nations share strategic conditions that define their foreign policies. Both are middle powers living in the shadow of giants. They are classic cases of what might be called bounded agency. The freedom of action is constrained by proximity to hegemons, forces them to constantly negotiate between autonomy and accommodation. To navigate the brewing storm, I really believe that Canada needs to reclaim a measure of autonomy and diversify its partnership. In effect, behave more like middle powers of Eurasia that have long balanced, stronger neighbors. Policymakers are talking of need for strategic reset in Canadian foreign policy. I believe this doesn't mean an anti-American turn. It means hard-headed realism about alignments. The subtext is clear. Canada must reduce its vulnerability to the United States by broadening its network of partnerships. As of me, Canada's future as a middle power may depend on adopting some of the adaptive strategies that Kazakhstan has refined over the past 30 plus years. So now we have many things to do, for example, on water security and water security technologies. Recently hosted a summit with France. So if we can promote any form of new regional dialogue between Canada and Kazakhstan, or Canada and Central Asia, because many years ago, Japan was actually the first nation to implement C5+ Japan approach. And now we have 13 C5+1 formats now foreign policy toolkits. Maybe it's time to rethink our relations with Canada, also in format of C5+ Canada, to work together on investment, to work together in strengthening economic ties, raising awareness on the region in Canada, and raising awareness of business opportunities in Canada to Kazakh business, because we also have huge business investors who might be interested to operate in North American markets. So I am going to stop to leave a space first.
Thank you, Miras. I think you speak to a lot of interesting sort of developments, at least at the policy level over the past year, especially when, at least in Canada, there's talk about exploring these sort of new ways of ensuring that the Canadian economy is more resilient and independent, and looking at areas of shared interest and synergy with new partners. Maybe I want to ask Darren this question as someone who is based on the West Coast, and looking at how sort of rhetoric is being translated into action. You have Ottawa talking about becoming an energy superpower, how there's a need to bolster the energy industry, something that Kazakhstan is very familiar with through its own experience. Do you see areas of unexplored opportunity, whether it's in areas such as energy or sustainable development or otherwise, where there can be more thought put into initiatives and dialogue to elevate the relationship?
Between Canada and Kazakhstan is what you're referring to. Yeah. Absolutely. And I go back to the earlier comment. I think that industry companies, such as ourselves, Eris, we're often at the pointy end, right? We're often particularly in the mining and minerals and energy, you're kind of going where the opportunity exists. Sometimes there's bumps along the way. I think from our perspective at Eris, I mean, we've really been encouraged and I think supported by the embassy in Ottawa and the Canadian embassy in Astana as well, along with the government in Kazakhstan, to really kind of help to pave the way, to help us kind of through those little bumps. And now, of course, what we're seeing is other companies over the last 2 to 3 years that have started to arrive and are really quite surprised around the opportunities in Kazakhstan. But at the end of the day, I think if we want to turbocharge that, I think it's like Miras had mentioned. There's I think Kazakhstan has to be one of the best countries in the world in that multi-vector approach, right? Where they have ties and links geopolitically, industrially, economically, with many different countries from all over. As Ambassador Kusanov had mentioned, I mean, more than 50% of the foreign direct investment comes from Europe, and you share that sort of statistic with folks here in North America, and they're very surprised about that. But then therein lies the opportunity. So I think it does come back again. A big turbocharger would be to see high levels of the Canadian government, the ministerial, the prime minister, for example, to engage with President Tokayev and the ministers in the Kazakhstan government, and demonstrate not only to Canadians and Canadian companies and to Kazakhs and Kazakh companies that this relationship is one that needs to continue to grow, but also to our neighbors and our other trading partners. At the end of the day, it's a competitive world out there. Kazakhstan and Canada have shall we say, the stuff that the rest of the world wants. We're very, very fortunate, and whether that be from an agricultural perspective. I was born and raised on a farm, 4th generation in Alberta, and we have thousands of head of Alberta cattle that have actually been exported to Kazakhstan to improve the quality of beef there. There's a link, on the agriculture. We know about critical minerals. We know about energy security. But Kazakhstan and Canada have what the world needs. So why not work together on figuring out how best we can do that for the people of Canada and the people of Kazakhstan, and really for the betterment of the broader world. We have the critical minerals that we need to green and electrify the economies around the world. We have the gas to displace coal, for example, to create the energy that we need. And why not share those sorts of experiences and work together on that?
Yeah, I think looking for those signals is something that's, you're hearing a growing chorus over, at least in Ottawa, but I think it's a sentiment that's shared across the country. Yelena, I wanted to bring you in on this question because you talked about sort of how businesses and private sector and investors are looking for different levels of government, whether at the federal level or provincial, to introduce measures, concrete measures to facilitate the kind of exchanges and economic partnerships that we're all looking for, whether that's incentives or otherwise. And with this new government under Mark Carney, you've seen a lot of more of that rhetoric when it comes to, they haven't used the word turbocharging, but in this broader context of raising the independence of the Canadian economy, focusing on the advantages that Canada has in critical minerals, energy, and otherwise. So you've talked about those incentives, but up until this point, since we're a few months in already, are you seeing that greater level of engagement and interest from the government stakeholders that you are speaking with about being serious to put into place the measures necessary to elevate the partnerships in Central Asia and Kazakhstan that you're looking for, that others in the industry are looking for?
Thank you, Johnson. Very good question. And actually, I was thinking about that. I was very pleased to hear Ambassador Dagan's comment on the fact that they're exploring opportunities for bilateral trade agreements. I think that would be wonderful for the businesses to actually have that enforcement to go to another market, and that will put significant wind in their sails to go and explore that opportunity. I can also share that many mining suppliers look at Kazakhstan as the window to the Middle East. We all know how Saudi Arabia now is exploring actively a mineral sector, and they want to diversify their economy from oil and gas. So many companies expressed to me, okay, why don't we go to Kazakhstan and then we see maybe to have a trade mission further to the Middle East to penetrate into that market as well. And maybe also a brief comment about the cultural, not differences, but similarities. I know that Canadians are known as one of the most nicest and most welcoming people. And I had the opportunity to experience that in Kazakhstan when I was there in Astana, that Kazakh people actually wonderful hosts and they're very engaging with the foreigners. So what a wonderful mix, right? When you don't have to break barriers on the cultural level, but you can work together and achieve greater things. So I think with that, we all see that there's huge opportunity and palpable potential for two nations to work together. And I know from the private businesses side that they eagerly wanted to come back and work further.
Thanks, Yelena. I think we're pulling up on the last portion of our session today. I don't think I've seen any Q&A in our Zoom so far, but I did want to sort of go around the table and ask a last question for all of you, and maybe ending on a positive note, a positive sum note, because we've talked about all the potential, and we've talked about all the runway for all these initiatives to take shape, the proper frameworks, the proper conditions, the proper policies. So I wanted to sort of get your perspective on the concrete examples from your view of things, from whether Kazakhstan's engagement with other partners or Canada's engagement from other partners, concrete examples where sort of economic partnership and political alignment holds lessons for the Canada-Kazakhstan relationship. Perhaps Miras, you can sort of take that one first, since you're very much familiar with Kazakhstan multi-vector foreign policy. But do you see positive examples of sort of this new impetus for partnership diversification elsewhere in the world in Kazakhstan foreign policy that has lessons for the Canada-Kazakhstan relationship. I believe you're on mute.
Sorry, I think as of now, Canada is a bit underrepresented in the international business community here in Astana. Why? Because we really enjoy huge investment from the US, European Union, China, so many different countries, including Japan, South Korea, India, and the rest of the partners. We are partner makers. We don't confront with anyone. The market is open. We have different success stories, not only in mining, but also in the field of education, because we have a Canadian school here in Astana, which is also a good example of people-to-people contacts. But what I really want to add as a conclusion of this discussion from my side, Kazakhstan-Canada relations is quite paradox in international affairs. We have so many similarities, both in our culture, in our society, which is multilingual in Canada and in Kazakhstan, in our political views, in our political culture and geostrategic approach, how we see the world, how we see the world order, how we see the values, principles, and core of international affairs. So we have so many positive things, but the paradox, you're working more on the issues on your bilateral affairs. And now we don't have any a real sample of stress or questions unsolved for our bilateral agenda. That's why we are a bit underrepresented in the agenda of each other. Because when you have so many things to solve in your foreign policy, for example, in Indo-Pacific or for Kazakhstan in Americas, when we have so many ongoing processes all around the world, we start to underestimate the real potential of our relations. Kazakhstan now works on idea to become an international education hub for higher education. And we really succeed to attract international students from China, India, and Pakistan. And for the first time, a group of that students was actually the biggest community of international students last year, with something around 60,000 international students, which is brilliant result for Kazakhstan. Canada has a brilliant universities, and we are ready to cooperate. We can think on joint programs, joint campuses, initiatives to make our societies, our countries, both politically, economically, but what is even more important, on people-to-people contacts, more close to each other. That's why I really believe that this small case of Canadian school in Astana will be a good starting point for our bilateral track in education and also in higher education, the fields I'm representing right now.
All right. Maybe, Darren, I can turn to you then on this last question of where we can find positive examples of cooperation between Kazakhstan and others that might have lessons for where we can take the Kazakhstan-Canadian relationship. Right.
Well, I think as Miras mentioned, and definitely what we've experienced, or I've experienced my visits to Kazakhstan, is how open the country is to sit down and to engage. If it's Japan, if it's South Korea, if it's Middle Eastern investors, it's the strong links with Turkish investors and Turkey, and of course China, the United States, and of course the biggest foreign direct investor coming out of Europe, and we're seeing more and more of that. There was a large summit, I think it was last month, where the European Union has pledged, I think, $13 billion into Central Asia, focusing on that middle corridor, on that those transportation links. So it's very clear, I think, for the Canadian government, Canadian businesses, that Kazakhstan is open to those partnerships. And if you think, I think if we just look at it, and there's been some discussions around the similarities, but there's enormous similarities between these two countries. If we think about large countries, large land masses, small populations, the longest border between two nations in the world is that between Canada and the United States. The second longest border is that between Kazakhstan and Russia. We think about, the industry, the importance of agriculture, the importance of critical minerals, the importance of energy. Guess what? Tick, tick, tick for all, for both Canada and Kazakhstan. We're 12 hours apart, so we're effectively on the opposite time zones, but our latitudes are very similar. You visit Sudbury or Regina or Calgary, it's the same flowers in the flower boxes that you see in Astana and Almaty. And so, you probably couldn't pick two, more similar countries in many regards, although on opposite sides of the poles, with similar resources, similar things that are underpinning their economy. And as Maras said, enormous opportunities to even link from an educational perspective as well. So, Kazakhstan, I think, has done a great job from that multi-vector geopolitical approach, as we mentioned. They've demonstrated that they're open for business, they're open for partnerships. Canada has a lot to offer, as we know, and has for many decades. And clearly it's probably as important today as it's been in the last 20 years for Canada to step up and to not rest on our laurels, not just rest on one very important, which will continue to be a very important partner, obviously the United States. But this really could be our time as well, both for Canada and for Kazakhstan.
All right. Yana, I believe you have the final word on this as we close the discussion. Looking at models elsewhere, partnerships elsewhere that can inspire more work that needs to be done on the bilateral relationship, whether at the economic or political levels. And standing in your position as someone who leads on business development, I think you have a lot of insight in looking at best practices elsewhere and how those can be applied in the relationship today.
Thank you. And Miras and Darren gave very good summary on the other industries that have huge potential in trade with Canada and Kazakhstan. Historically, it happened that Canadian trade initiatives been directed more to Europe and to partners down south, right? And that's where most of the trade is happening. But Canada can take a page from Kazakhstan book as well on the equilibrium of different geopolitical forces that push on them, but they're so wonderfully balanced in there and continue driving forward with that. And I think that's something that all of us can benefit from, and Canada can kind of go diagonal now and export those markets to the Central Asia and the Middle East as well. We know that there's a lot of capital that Canada can benefit too. We heavily relied on the United States in terms of the providing capital to the startups and new businesses, but that part of the world also is very capital intensive, and it will be beneficial for the trade as well. Taking a page from the relationship that happened with the South America in the mining region as well, right? We work very closely with the trade commissioners in Chile and Peru and Mexico, and those countries demonstrate that yes, it's possible, even though there's language barriers. It's still very meaningful for both nations to collaborate on the advancing mining practices, and Canada has very high expertise in that, and something that is important for all of us is health and safety, and Canada has a stamp of quality on those products and services that push the mining industry forward.
All right. Well, with that, I think we've had a very comprehensive discussion on the way ahead for both countries in the global landscape that's witnessing a lot of change over the past few months, if not years. And I'd like to thank once again our panelists for joining us today here at IPD, as well as the ambassadors who joined us earlier for giving us a very experienced perspective from different sectors of the relationship. So I'd like to encourage everyone listening in to continue to follow the work being done to improve and elevate the engagements and partnerships that we're seeing, because I do believe that from what we're hearing, both at the ambassador level and here on this panel, there is a lot more interest and a lot more motivation to do so in the years ahead. So with that said, thank you once again to everyone for joining us for this discussion today. And I encourage you to follow our work at IPD on social media and on various channels, and as well as the work of our panelists and their respective distinguished organizations. So with that, take care, everyone, and have a good day and a good evening.